Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has fired Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, replacing him with the country's Foreign Minister Israel Katz. What does this mean for the Israel-Hamas War? What is behind this move and why now? I'm Alon Burstein. Let's dive in. On the evening of Tuesday, November 5th local time, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu fired the country's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Despite being from the same Likud party, Gallant and Netanyahu have been at odds throughout most critical junctures of the government's life. This is in fact the second time Netanyahu has fired him since the government was established. The first time occurred 6 months before the outbreak of the war, back in April of 2023. Netanyahu's government had been pushing for a massive judicial overhaul in order to weaken the country's legislative branch, and Gallant, the minister responsible for the IDF and the country's defenses, had called on Netanyahu to stop the process since it was weakening the country's military cohesion and endangering security. In response, Netanyahu fired Gallant, but was then forced to rescind this after massive protests broke out throughout the country for over 48 hours. Since then, despite massive bad blood between the sides, Netanyahu has repeatedly threatened to fire Gallant, but has never acted on it until now. So what were the main sources of disagreement between Netanyahu and Gallant throughout the war, and how will this impact the war's trajectory? In the initial stages, when the war broke out, Gallant and Netanyahu were far more aligned with regards to the war's aims, specifically in the Gaza Strip. There are persistent rumors that Gallant tried to push Netanyahu to engage Hezbollah in Lebanon already in the initial stages of the war back in October of 2023. However, these protocols have not yet been published, so at this point these are only rumors, even though they are repeatedly surfaced within Israel. Since then, however, there have been increasing disagreements between the sides, with the majority of Gallant's criticism focusing on two aspects of the way Netanyahu was running the war. The first has been Israel's lack of developing a quote-unquote day-after strategy for the Gaza Strip. The Israeli government has been consistent in stating what won't happen in Gaza. There will be no more Hamas-led government. The Palestinian Authority will not be allowed in. There will be no Palestinian state. However, it has not developed a cohesive plan for an alternative regime within the Gaza Strip. Already within the first few months of the war, and in far more earnest after the IDF's pullout from northern Gaza in December of 2023, Defense Minister Gallant began to increasingly criticize the government that while the military is fulfilling its assignments and fighting the Hamas in the different areas of the Gaza Strip and clearing those areas of Hamas, the lack of political vision for the future of the Gaza Strip will lead to a never-ending cycle in which the IDF is consistently required to re-enter areas it evacuated, since Hamas will re-establish itself. In a moment of analysis, I'll add that Gallant's prediction on this matter have proven themselves to be very accurate. The IDF is now carrying out its third major operation in northern Gaza since the area was declared clear of Hamas 11 months ago. The military has also had to re-enter areas in southern Gaza and Khan Yunis, retaking areas in Rafah as well. So what Gallant predicted, without developing an alternative in the Gaza Strip, the IDF is going to continue this sort of cat and mouse game with Hamas, has largely proven itself. The second main point where Netanyahu and Gallant collided on the war relates to the primacy of the hostage situation. Throughout the war, and particularly since May of this year, when there was a more concrete hostage deal on the table, there's been a growing rift between the Defense Minister Gallant and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Gallant consistently stated that returning the Israeli hostages held in the Gaza Strip should be the highest priority in the war, and he went so far as to state that even if this requires an end to the war or postponing Hamas's defeat, that is still the country's highest obligation. Netanyahu in turn has been adamant that returning the hostages is only one of the war's aims, and has gone so far as stating that he will not agree to any hostage deal that requires an end to the war before Hamas's destruction. As an example of this, in a heated cabinet meeting from mid-July of this year, responding to pressure that was raised by Gallant and other heads of Israel's security establishment to proceed with a hostage deal, Netanyahu was quoted as stating that Israel should not be pressured, Hamas is the one that should be pressured, and, quote, the hostages are suffering, but they are not dying, end quote. In addition to these disagreements with regards to the war, it is also important to note, as I state many times with regards to the different facets and actors in the war, what appears to be the final clincher with regards to Gallant's firing is internal Israeli politics rather than the war itself. Within Israel, there are several major political upheavals that are brewing, chief among them being the subject of drafting ultra-Orthodox Jewish men to the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. While historically political deals have been crafted by each and every Israeli government in order to bypass the situation and enable the continued exemption of ultra-Orthodox Jewish men, Gallant has been adamant that this time he will not participate in such a maneuver in the current state due to the incredible toll that Israeli reserve soldiers have had to pay throughout the war. As defense minister, it's important to note that he's in charge of the military, and therefore his voice was crucial in both public sentiment and also in the legal matters with regards to if he threw his weight behind trying to find a solution for this exemption or objecting to it. As Netanyahu's government became increasingly shaky in recent weeks, with the ultra-Orthodox parties threatening to vote against the government, this is very likely the most pressing reason for Netanyahu's move in the current time. With regards to the timing, on Election Day in the United States, it is very likely not a coincidence that Gallant was fired specifically on November 5th. This enabled far less international outcry against Netanyahu's move of firing the person who, certainly in the U.S. administration, also in Europe and elsewhere, was seen as the moderate voice within Israel's war efforts. The fact that today most of the international media has its attention on the United States, very unlikely that that was pure coincidence. Regarding how this will impact the war itself, Gallant's replacement, Israel Katz, is a top-ranking member of Netanyahu's Likud party alongside Gallant. However, over the past year, he has become a very close ally of Netanyahu himself. Unlike Gallant, who is also a retired IDF general, Katz was a junior officer in the IDF and has no security background to his name. He has served in a variety of different political positions over the years, including Minister of Transport, Agriculture, Finance, and the Foreign Ministry. However, he has absolutely no clout in terms of security matters within Israel. That does not mean that he is not qualified to be Minister of Defense. However, it does mean, under the current circumstances, that this lack of sort of security credentials will likely lead him to rely almost entirely on Netanyahu's position when it comes to the war's trajectory. We are most likely to see this effect when it comes to the potential for hostage negotiations. The different hawkish elements within Israel's government who object to a hostage deal all publicly welcomed Gallant being fired today and Katz being appointed, and there will be substantially less pressure within Israel's cabinet to move towards a hostage deal at the expense of continued military activity in the Gaza Strip. Obviously, time will tell what other impacts this will have, but what is for sure is that even if we don't see these impacts right away, since Gallant does not give the day-to-day orders on how the military operates in Gaza or in Lebanon, we are going to see substantial repercussions on the broader trajectory of the war, as the voice that has been considered the more moderate voice within Israel's cabinet has now been fired and replaced with someone who, at least if we go by recent history, is a complete ally of Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu. That is my brief summary on this latest development, the firing of Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. If you find these summaries informative, please do remember to send them on to anyone you think might be interested in the war. Hit that like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.